We now have new business, and I'd like to invite Chief Julie Williams of the Police Department to come forward and give a presentation to us, an update on activities within the department. Good afternoon, Chief.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of council, Mr. Turner. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to come before you today to give you an update on the police department. With your permission, Mayor, what I'd like to do is briefly touch on the items that were in the agenda information that I shared with you, and then open it up for questions.
Okay, fine. Thank you, Chief.
Okay. I'll first talk about the Lisbon Street incident. That occurred on April 16th, a mere 11 days after the Laurel Avenue homicide of April 5th. And all homicide investigations are extremely labor-intensive. Some certainly present more challenges than others. For example, you may have witnesses that may evade law enforcement for whatever reason. Maybe they have some criminal involvement in other things. You may have witnesses that don't want to cooperate. Their cooperation may be lacking. It could be because of criminal involvement in things, or it could be that they have fear of retaliation. Or there may be credibility issues with the involved parties, and it makes it more difficult to make the case and wrap things up. But to say the least, large quantities of additional staffing are always required during the initial phase of a homicide investigation. And you should know that our initial response to the Laurel Avenue incident involved 13 sworn VPD members, and within a handful of days, we had over 40 other individuals that were assisting us in that investigation. Those agencies that were lending assistance to us were the Sarasota Sheriff's Office, Charlotte County Sheriff's Office, Northport Police Department, State Attorney's Office, and the ME's office. This investigation is still an active investigation as I speak. Now, being assigned in a homicide investigation basically renders the assigned detectives completely unavailable for other cases. Could be for up to months, depends on the complexity of the investigation. At the time of the Lisbon incident, the department's available investigative staffing was inadequate for us to assume investigative responsibility for that incident. The same investigators would have ended up being assigned to the Lisbon incident, and you never assign the same investigators, same primary investigators, to 2 homicide investigations at the same time. To have taken on the Lisbon homicide investigation would have rendered our entire detective bureau closed to other investigations for some time, as something that we simply cannot do. We're a small department, we have limited staffing. Now, I will tell you that there was a consideration given by me to pulling capable sworn people from the squads to try to fill in and help in an investigation, but then it's like robbing Peter to pay Paul. So then I would have short-staffed the squads for up to months and not had adequate staffing to run the squads. So the decision was made after an amicable agreement on scene at the Lisbon incident that the Sheriff's Office would take that investigation. I'd like to move on briefly to the assertion that an officer was improperly charged with destroying public records. This simply is not true. The agenda information provided to you fully covers this topic. The principals involved in this case have moved on. There are only 1 or 2 individuals who are trying to personally gain from keeping this alive and revisiting it, and I don't think really anything more needs to be said about this topic. There was an assertion that an officer has been charged with insubordination for making public records requests. Once again, this is not true. This assertion does involve an open investigation for which information cannot be disclosed per Florida statute. The individual making this assertion appears to be on a mission to further the agenda of an individual within my agency who has chosen not to avail himself of opportunities to address his concerns in an appropriate manner. I think that pretty much wraps up what I should say about this topic. I'd like to move on to the incident on Laurel Avenue. This occurred on Saturday, May 1st. This is still an open investigation, and so again, Florida statute does forbid disclosure of information on the matter. However, what I would like to do is discuss very briefly our response to this incident in general terms. Again, your agenda materials did provide you quite a bit of information on this topic, and it demonstrates that our actions were proper and lawful when we, number one, dealt with the victim away from the scene to ensure his safety, established a perimeter around the address while we sorted things out, contemplated Detective Bureau and SWAT assistance to maximize safety for the neighbors, police officers, and the suspects. We also brought the division commander into the mix to ensure that safe, clear, and deliberate and legal actions were taken. Then we just briefly paused and re-interviewed the victim again because we wanted to verify key details of the incident before we moved forward with a plan of action. And then once we did that, we put into motion sound decisions that did not jeopardize the safety or welfare of our community. And in the end, what we determined is that we did not have adequate probable cause to force our way into the residence or to get a search warrant. The state attorney's office has made it clear to law enforcement agencies that to, quote, walk a warrant through requires that the case be predicated on witness credibility, that's critical, and that the case be extremely clear-cut. Those are their words, extremely clear-cut. The victim's story in this incident changed. Remember I said we re-interviewed the victim. His story changed, and that changed the dynamics of the situation. It altered the urgency of the situation. And it also altered our ability to meet the necessary threshold that we needed to be able to enter the residence with or without a warrant. The belief by the person who has raised concerns about this incident is that we should have walked the warrants through and arrested the suspects. And honestly, his belief is irrelevant because that person is not a law enforcement officer, is not an attorney, is not a judge. His opinion has no bearing on our decisions in the field. And trust me, he wouldn't want us making decisions based on individuals who have no background to provide legal direction to us and that don't have the authority to render legal rulings to support our decisions. I am confident that if we had busted into that address and locked people up, the same person would be screaming bloody murder that we violated their constitutional rights.